Have you ever noticed that the best dominants don't need to raise their voice? They can walk into a room, say almost nothing, and suddenly you just feel it. That quiet magnetic energy that says you're safe and you'll obey. They're not born knowing how to do that, it's a skill. Today, we're talking about 10 hidden power plays only experienced DOMs use. The subtle psychological tools that create obedience without force and devotion without having to beg for it. If you've ever wondered why some dynamics last years while others fade after the honeymoon phase, this episode will show you exactly why. Welcome to the Doms of Living podcast. You probably clicked on this episode because you want to understand what separates a real dominant from someone who's just acting the part. Well, you're in the right place. I'm Alessandra from Doms of Living, and around here, we don't do tricks and gimmicks. We study the actual psychology and the communication and the emotional mastery behind true power exchange. When I first stepped into this lifestyle, I thought dominance was just about intensity, the commands, the postures, the performance. It took me years and more than my fair share of failed attempts at this lifestyle with my partner, but I realized that the most commanding people were the ones who could stay silent and stay grounded and be intentional. That's what these 10 power plays are all about. The quiet skills that make a dominant irresistible and that make a submissive melt. And not from fear, but from trust. We'll move from the smallest signals, things you can do even in mid conversation, and move to the deepest mindset shifts that transform a Dom sub relationship. And by the end, you'll have a roadmap you can use tonight, whether you're leading, following, or just curious about what real power exchange looks like when it's completely stripped of ego. So grab your notebook and maybe your partner if you have one, and let's start with the very first hidden power play, the one most people overlook because it's so simple. It's called the pause. Power doesn't always come from motion or action. Sometimes it comes from stillness. When an experienced Dom pauses, the world kind of rearranges around them before a command, after a correction, even mid scene, that space forces attention. It makes the submissive lean in. I remember a time when I learned this the hard way. My Dom, who's my husband, he didn't correct me immediately when I messed up with a task he had me do. He just went quiet and said nothing. And the silence felt heavier than any punishment could have. And by the time he finally spoke, my whole body was tuned into him and listening and waiting. New DOMs, on the other hand, they fill every second with noise, it seems like, because to them, silence feels uncomfortable. But seasoned DOMs, they know that the pause is the command. It tells the submissive, I'm in control. I'm in control of even the silence between us. So try it tonight. If you're the Dom, the next time you give an order, don't rush the follow up. Let the quietness do the heavy lifting for you because when you master the pause, your words start to feel like permission slips to your sub. You're inviting them to think and engage. And that brings us to the second power play, and that is selective attention. So everyone craves approval, especially submissives who thrive on being seen. Experienced DOMs understand that their attention is basically currency. Instead of flooding a sub with constant praise or touch, they offer it strategically, even intentionally withdrawing it when needed. And that small shift just creates a lot of focus. The sub learns, like, oh, wow, attention is earned through obedience and being present. And I have heard some people say, well, isn't withholding attention unethical or cruel? So let me give you an example so you can see how to do it right. So I had a student who really struggled with getting his submissive to be consistent and proactive in her submission. And he loved showering his sub with constant validation and praise, but she began kind of tuning him out and she stopped being obedient unless she was getting his constant attention. So I kind of told him how to pause and observe what she was actually doing as a sub inside their dynamic because he admitted he was just over rewarding at that point. And he told me her engagement like skyrocketed. She started trying again, and not out of fear or panic, but because she was excited to basically earn his gaze. And notice I didn't say that love is withheld. It's never that. You never withhold needs either. But attention becomes a training tool instead of just a constant given in the dynamic. When used consensually and selectively in that way, attention isn't just manipulation, it's reinforcement. It teaches that power and intimacy are built on awareness, not on demand. And when you finally do give that attention back, whether it's a glance or a word or a touch, it hits 10 times harder. I know this for a fact. Now, let's talk about the third power play that experienced DOMs use, and that is micro commands. Some DOMs think that control requires elaborate rituals or hours long scenes, but experienced DOMs know that control lives in the smallest moments. Commands like kneel, eyes down, stay. Even just a raised eyebrow can speak volumes. I can't do it. I don't have that Spock gene, I don't think. But those micro commands, they can weave dominance into daily life. They keep the dynamic alive outside the bedroom, too. It can turn ordinary spaces like your kitchen or a drive to the store into these quiet training grounds. One of my favorite memories actually was driving to a dungeon party together one night, and I was really stressing about it, and I was talking a mile a minute on the way there, and my dom just reached over and placed his hand on my thigh, and he just said, "Behave." That single word just changed the entire energy of that car ride. So, in these tiny cues, they just build obedience, kind of like muscle memory. The submissive stops waiting for grand gestures and elaborate tasks, and they start living inside their Dom's authority. If you're new to this and you're the Dom, just pick one micro command to start and make it consistent and deliver it calmly. And soon you'll see it won't feel like control, it will just feel natural. You've probably heard of the illustration of how to tame a wild horse, and it's a lot like training a sub. So, with a wild horse, you wouldn't put this tight rein on them right away, they'd be bracing against it. So, instead, you put this very long rein on a horse, this long leash, and the wild horse can run around and jump and do whatever it wants, and it feels like it has that freedom. And then slowly over time, you pull in that rein or pull in that leash until the horse just naturally comes to a place of rest. And so that's what this is with these micro commands. It's not some big elaborate scene or some big elaborate ritual where you just rein them in right away. The micro commands do it little by little until the sub comes to that place of obedience on their own and by themselves. And so, if you need help creating some of these micro commands or these micro protocols, if you're a member of our All Access Pass, you can check out the plug and play protocol planner that's in your course library there. It just helps you design these micro moments so your relationship stays dynamic even on the busiest days. Now let's move on to the fourth power play, and that is the controlled touch. So anyone can touch, but few people can communicate through touch alone, like a hand on the back of the neck, fingers tracing the jaw, just the weight of a palm resting on inner thigh. That's a message to the sub. It's saying you belong here. And experienced DOMs, they understand that touch is a language. Every movement says something like, I'm here, I'm watching, I've got you. So, controlled touch creates safety, and a sub who feels safe surrenders more deeply. I once taught this kind of controlled touch at a workshop, and a Dom came up to me afterwards and said, I thought I needed to just spank harder, but now I know I really need to just focus on spanking more mindfully. So, believe me, once you master controlled touch, even a fingertip can feel like a command. And again, if you're a member of our All Access Pass, you have a guided exercise in your course library called Erotic Touch. It's a short training you can do with your partner, and it just builds nonverbal control safely. Now, let's talk about the power play move that separates hobbyists from masters. So, number five is consistency over intensity. Because anyone can dominate for an hour, but few can do it for a lifetime. New DOMs, I see they chase frenzy. They think in terms of big punishments, dramatic scenes, and they just constantly look for the next shiny new object or shiny new flogger in this instance. But experienced DOMs, they know the secret is consistency. So things like following through on roles and keeping promises and maintaining structure even when you're tired or distracted, because that reliability tells your sub, I'm stable, I've got this, you can relax and just turn off your mind. And the moment a submissive can do that and truly relax like that, that's when the real power exchange begins. I tell my coaching clients all the time that consistency is kink's love language. It's what keeps devotion alive long after the marks and bruises fade. So think of it like training a nervous system, not a person. The sub learns safety through repetition. So your tone, your rituals, your predictability, they become the nervous system's anchor. So instead of asking, how intense can I make this? Ask, how consistent can I be? Because once you've built that stability, you're ready for the deeper psychological tools, the ones that don't just control behavior, but that transform it. That's why inside the All Access Pass, we do monthly reviews. It's where members track those habits and hold themselves accountable, because consistency is easier when you have structure and community and a coach behind you. But now let's talk about how power isn't just physical, it's also emotional containment. So, number six is the emotional mirror. Experienced DOMs don't absorb a sub's chaos. They mirror it back in a calm form. So when a sub spirals, a newbie dominant might lecture or punish, but an experienced Dom will lower their voice and sometimes their breathing, and they just reflect steadiness. They show their sub that you can fall apart and I'll still be here. That's emotional dominance. They're the anchor in the storm. I actually had this happen to me recently. I had a mini anxiety attack just mid scene with my Dom when I was restrained. And instead of panicking right along with me and freaking out or apologizing, profusely and going, oh my God, I'm so sorry, he just showed me to, focus on my breathing, and he told me to match his breathing because I hadn't safe worded. So he just 100% tuned into me. And when I started tensing my muscles and pulling against my restraints, he just put his hands on my arms, and he really just saw me as a whole person and not just a role in this scene. So try it the next time that tensions rise, instead of reacting, regulate. Your calm becomes the correction that they need. Now, every command lands better when it has context. So that's why the seventh power play that experienced DOMs use is the pre frame. So here's how this works. So before giving a direction, an experienced DOM pre frames the why. Like, this is to center you, this is to remind you who you are. It's short, but it shifts the tone from ego to purpose. I'll give you an example of this that my Dom does every week. So, right before he does a maintenance spanking on me, he'll put me over on his knee. And before he gets started, he says, "Do you know why I'm doing this?" And I'll say, "Yes, it's so I can stay a good girl and be obedient this week." And he'll say, "Yes, this makes sure you're going to be good so I don't have to give you a punishment spanking later because that will be a whole lot worse." So, pre framing transforms dominance from something mechanical to something meaningful. And it lets the sub really internalize obedience as growth and not just compliance. When I coach DOMs and subs, this is usually the turning point. Once the why becomes really clear for them, then just everything falls into place because it's not the task or the punishment itself that's kinky and hot, it's the meaning behind it. And sometimes the waiting is the punishment. And that brings us to number 8, discipline through anticipation. And man, I hate this one as a sub, but experienced DOMs understand that the mind is the most responsive tool of all. Delaying gratification, extending suspense, or letting a consequence just hang there, it keeps the sub mentally hovering, so to speak, and keeps them hovering around your authority. You're teaching patience and awareness and surrender. One time I missed a task and my Dom made me wait until the next day before he even discussed, my screw up. In that first couple hours, I replayed every detail in my head just probably 100 times. And by that morning, I was mentally begging for my punishment just so I could have it resolved and be done with. And that's when I realized that discipline doesn't have to be loud and painful to be powerful. So instead of punishing, build anticipation. Let time become part of the scene. So restrain your sub and blindfold them and just let them wait like that. And let them have to mentally guess what you're going to do to them. Because usually, the longer the wait, the deeper the release. Now, number 9 takes anticipation to a whole new level, and it's the subtle withdrawal. Because sometimes the most powerful move is stepping back, a brief withdrawal of attention or affection or presence. When you do it with consent and intention, it just forces the submissive to really recenter around the dynamic. It's not ghosting or punishment, it's recalibration. It's a pause to remind both partners where like the gravity sits. And this is especially useful in long-term dynamics like mine because a little space can bring life into your dynamic. So, the Dom needs their own hobbies, their own friends, time for self-care. Even going to munches and dungeons by themselves can be really helpful. And the sub needs time away too, so they can reflect on their dynamic and their role. So things like meditation, journaling, these are all really important practices. And when you return together, the connection feels earned, like assumed. And you also don't run the risk of unhealthy codependence. Now, before we get to number 10, if you're a dominant who wants to master these power plays, or if you're a submissive who wants to better understand them, grab my free dominant quick start guide at domsubliving.com/dominant. It's a step-by-step roadmap to building trust and confidence and control. And it's the same foundation these 10 principles really come from. So I'll link to it below. But now the 10th power play that experienced DOMs use, it surprises a lot of people because it's command through care. Because the strongest DOMs, they lead through compassion. Crazy, right? But we're talking about things like aftercare, checking boundaries, remembering how your sub likes their tea after a scene, the names of their stuffies even. So that care doesn't dilute authority, it defines it. So when a submissive feels safe, they open up wider, they surrender deeper, they stop performing and start belonging. And dominance without empathy is just theater. It's just an act. But dominance with empathy is an identity. I'll never forget a couple from my mentorship group. They told me that after a heavy impact scene, the dom would just wrap his partner in a blanket and he gave her water and snacks and just whispered affirmations about how proud he was. And they said that she would just burst into tears, not because she was in so much pain from the scene, but because she felt so cared for and just felt so vulnerable. So that's commanding through care and compassion. So now you know the 10 power plays that experienced DOMs use, but knowledge alone isn't power. Integration is. So start small. Pick just one or two of these power plays to practice this week. Maybe it's the pause or the micro commands or even what we just talked about, how, commanding through care. Notice how they change the energy between you and your partner. Notice how your confidence grows when control just stops being something you perform but starts being something you embody. Because dominance isn't about what you do to someone, it's about the energy you hold for them. So, which of these 10 power plays spoke to you the most? Tell me in the comments or reach out to me on social media. Your stories really help other dominants and submissives grow too. And I genuinely love reading how you apply these ideas in your life. And don't forget to grab my free dominant quick start guide at domsubliving.com/dominant. It's your step-by-step roadmap to building trust and confidence and control, and the link is in the description too. And if you found this episode helpful, definitely subscribe for more real talk about BDSM dynamics and psychology and lifestyle growth. And until next time, keep embracing your power and pleasure through Dom Subliving.